when I left the NFL after 6 years, I was spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically destroyed. Meditation has been, to put it simply, the most transformational tool of my entire life.
So I want to start by telling you about the first time I saw you.
Okay.
All right. We were at parent-teacher conferences.
Yeah.
I just moved to LA with my family. And so it's all just weird to me already. And you know, we're big people sitting in a little desk at our kids' schools. And, you know, I'm just sitting there and taking it all in. And then in walks this guy. And I saw the other men in the room light up when they saw you. All right. And I'm just like, that's odd. Why are these guys so happy to see this man? And it was like, it wasn't like, you know, you seeing a celebrity kind of thing. It was like seeing a friend. Right? And so I saw the guys come up and greet you and hug you. And I was just like, man, this guy must be a really good person. And, you know, the parent-teachers conference stuff commenced. You know, the teacher introduced herself and talked a little bit, but then she passed it to you to do a group meditation for us at a parent-teachers conference. Definitely a first. And I was like, oh, this is cool. This is really interesting. And I heard your voice, and I was just like, your voice, there was something familiar about it. Not just that I might have heard your voice before, but there was something familiar. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And, you know, from that moment, I was just like, man, this guy has something, you know. But then that was that. Cut to some time later, we ended up, of course, connecting. But that first introduction to you, man, like you changed the room when you stepped into it.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
I want to ask you about this because that meditation that you held for us in that moment, how has this tool of meditation been valuable in your life?
Wow, dude. Thank you for sharing that. That's so interesting because of my perspective of that experience of walking in there. And it was a new school for us too. It was my daughter's first year in that school. And I had met the teacher a couple times. I think it might have been the first. I was super intimidated. That's kind of how I'm always like, I have a big self-worth thing, you know, and which is part of my journey. And so meditation has been, to put it simply, the most transformational tool of my entire life. And I've been meditating now every day for the last 6 years. And it's completely changed who I am on a molecular level, on a cellular level. Radically. There was a lot of chaos in my childhood, a lot of alcoholism, a lot of physical abuse, and football was his vehicle for me to transcend all of that. And I was about 8 years old when I saw on the news at my grandparents' house in Connecticut the Jets and the Giants in training camp. And it was just this seed was planted in my eye. That's what I'm going to do in my mind's eye. That's who I'm going to be when I grow up. And my mom would never let me play. Finally, my freshman year of high school, she let me play football. And I was always the biggest kid, and it was just a rocket ship to the moon from there. Everything I did, how I carried myself, how I lived, how I ate, how I spoke, was all in alignment with achieving this dream of playing in the NFL. And everything that, anytime anybody would say to me, Ed, what are you going to do when you grow up? I'd say, I'm going to play in the NFL. They'd say, that's cool, man. What's plan B? I'd say, there is no plan B. That's what I'm doing. And it manifested. I manifested that. I visualized it. I saw it every single day. Every time I woke up, every time I stepped on the football field, I saw myself playing in the NFL. And with that, though, I was proving to the world how big and tough and scary I was, because I was really scared during my childhood. There wasn't a lot of stable ground, and I had a lot of rage. I had a lot of anger.
You said in your book, you said, I saw football as the vehicle to transcend the darkness I found myself in.
Yeah, yeah. That's what it was. That's what it was. And I put that rage on the field, and that's why I was the best player on every team I ever played on until I got to the NFL. And I was team captain. I was always the most violent guy on the field. I was always the hardest. You know, you'd see me on the film. I'd be the O-lineman sprinting down the field with the running back or the receiver, picking the guys up off the floor, knocking people over piles. Just I was a devastating machine, you know, and I loved it. I loved football. But through the process, finally I was drafted in 2009, 39th overall by the Jags in the second round. And had a great rookie year. The next off season, going into my second season, I ruptured the disc in my back, L5S1, doing these Kaiser squat machines. And we were doing these max rep Kaiser squats. And it was the beginning of this deconstruction of that person, this warrior person that I was, that I had built myself up to be. And for the next 6 years, I played 4 years in Jacksonville, 2 years with the Bears. I really was on this constant cycle of getting injured and then getting myself out of injury. And that's a really tough road to be on, because you don't have time when you're in the NFL. You don't have time. It's get back out on the field, you know, by any means necessary. The pills, the injections, tape it up, do the thing, whatever you got to do, get back out on the field. And that was my mentality as this warrior. And this was my family. These were my brothers. The coaches were my fathers. This was my whole world. And I was willing to do anything, literally give my life. Looking back at my football career, I was in the hospital a lot. I probably was on the edge of death a handful of times, whether it was my back injury, the shoulder surgery, the back surgery. I ruptured my appendix my last year in Chicago, which was really the universe saying, dude, it's okay. You can be done. And when I left the NFL after 6 years, I was spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically destroyed completely. My fourth year in Jacksonville, I'd come back. I'd worked my ass off to get back after the shoulder injury, had shoulder surgery, came back, had this ruptured disc, then had to have surgery on that, came back from that. Then I had an infection in the disc after the surgery, had to go on 8 weeks of intravenous antibiotics, came back from that. And then my last year in Jacksonville, first game of the season, a guy got thrown into my left ankle, which ended up being a low high ankle sprain. Team doctors said 2 to 3 week recovery. I got a second opinion through my agent. Doc said, this is really like a 6 to 8 week recovery, and you're lucky you don't need surgery. I rushed back after 2 weeks. Head coach is on my ass, literally calling me as I'm leaving a bodywork session, questioning whether or not I'm trying to sit out and catch a paycheck.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this was a new head coach, and he just had, I don't know. So I rush back, get my ass kicked against the Bengals. I'm playing Geno Atkins, all-pro D tackle, who the year before I had a really good game against. But I just get my ass kicked. I get benched at halftime. And it was soul-crushing. Coming in at halftime, there was this commotion outside, which I later learned was my O-line coach, who had been with me since the beginning, and our new head coach fighting overtaking me out of the game. And then they came in, and they knew how much pain I was in, because I was telling them all week, I'm like, dude, I can't push off my left ankle to move inside to the right. I'm playing left guard, and I can't move inside because I've got no power in my left ankle. And I'm telling them this all week. They're like, it'll be fine. We'll get you the Toradol. We'll tape it up. We'll do a good job. We'll get you some pain medicine before the game. I'm like, okay. And of course, I'm just getting eaten alive. It's just it's hell. And so O-line comes in, he's all huffed up. I could tell it was like, was he just in a bar fight or something? And he said, Eb, we're going to sit you down. And the head coach comes over. He's like, Eb, we're going to sit you down. We need to get you back healthy. And I just have tears streaming down my face. And I'm like, I told you guys this all week. So I'm like, okay, you're going to sit me down. After the game, the head coach tells the media that the left guard spot's up for grabs.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah. And I was just, at first I said, okay, bitch. And that whole week in practice, I just kicked ass, came back, had a great game against the Bears the following week. I earned that starting spot, I guess, that had been mine. And we went away for the bye week, came back, played the Raiders, lost to the Raiders. At this point, we were maybe 1-8. It's a horrible year. It's a horrible year. We've just been driven into the ground, honestly. The coach was like, we're going to be the hardest working team in the NFL. And we were definitely the most overworked team in the NFL. And this isn't a rant against my coach. It's just like, what is, We would run 200 plus reps a day in the sweltering heat. Every guy, we had team captains going to the coach's office saying, Coach, man, we're done. We're toast. We got no energy on Sunday. But coach was like, we're gonna keep doing things the way we're doing them. Great, we're 1-8. I think, And so after the Raiders game, I get benched because they're making all these changes to the team. So I was named after being a team captain and an energy center of the team since day one. Every team I've ever played on, I get benched, and I was crushed. I was like, my confidence was destroyed. As an offensive lineman, the most important thing in your arsenal is your confidence. Stepping out onto that field every play, knowing you're going to dominate the guy in front of you. If you don't have that, doesn't matter how big you are, how strong you are. I've seen the biggest, strongest, most freak athletes step out onto the field every Sunday and get their asses kicked and not be able to do anything because they have no confidence. They don't believe. That's the biggest thing,
So you don't know this, but as of this recording, we just released this kind of masterclass on confidence.
I love that.
And how it affects so many parts of our lives. So that's
perfect.
Powerful.
Perfect. Of course you do.
Well, listen, I want to make sure we stay with this because you said something profound. I've never heard this said before. You said we're going to be the hardest, quote, hardest working, but there's a difference between being hardworking and overworked.
Yeah.
And that balance there, finding there's grace that's involved in that.
Absolutely. That's been a big practice of mine in my life after football, is finding that balance. So I get benched. I'm crushed. The end of the year was a wash for me. I wanted nothing to do with the team. I totally shut it down emotionally, mentally. I wanted nothing. I was miserable, to say the least. I was in a lot of pain physically. Now I had been basically exiled. I'm trying to talk to the coaches like, dude, what's the deal, man? I've been the starter for so long. I've given you everything I have, and now you can't even tell me why I'm being benched. I could see the lump in my O-line coach's throat, Andy Heck, who I love. He won a Super Bowl with the Chiefs recently, and he's had a really nice stretch since, and he's one of the best O-line coaches I've ever been around. And he just had this lump in his throat, like he was about to burst into tears every time I talked to him. And the year ends. I'm going into free agency, just about the worst way you could go into free agency, coming out of being benched halfway through the season. I've had a lot of injuries. I had a couple conversations. Finally, I decide to give it another shot, sign with the Bears, have one great year in Chicago, come back for last year in Chicago, a second year in Chicago. It was, the business of football was really starting to wear away at my interest in it and my love for it. So my appendix ruptured. And I saw that light at the end of the tunnel, which I had been thinking about for a long time. Because when I was a kid, I was like, I'm going to play this game forever. I'm going to play 10 years in the NFL. And here I was after year 6. And that year, I remember coming back from the ruptured appendix, which happened here in LA. My high school was retiring my jersey. And I was at this ceremony. And I'm doubled over in pain. Because I've got this, my appendix is rupturing as I was watching the game after the induction ceremony. Got rushed to the emergency room 2 days later because I refused to go. I was like, there's something.
Typical.
Yeah, of
Typical.
course, right? Of course. But we were about to go and get on the plane that afternoon to fly back to Chicago. And I said, I can't get on the plane. Something's really wrong. Went to the emergency room. Find out I've got a ruptured appendix. Have emergency surgery. I'm in the hospital here in LA for a week. I lose about 25, 30 pounds. Have to call the coaches, the trainers, all the people. And finally I go back. They say, Eb, take it easy for a month, get your weight back. This was probably week 9, so I had a month off, and then we had maybe 4 games left at the end of the season where I was playing again. And I remember when I had just gotten back to start practicing again, because they had been doing blood tests and all sorts of things to make sure that all the toxicity and bacteria from the ruptured appendix was out of my system. And I remember I was just back to practicing, and I'm watching this film, and I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing here? It was so clear. It was like a light. Somebody turned, like I had been sitting in a dark room and someone turned the light on. And I thought to myself, what am I doing here? There's 1,000 places I'd rather be. I'm in so much pain from my neck to my toes. I'm popping pills just to sit here and film. I'm watching this film and I'm looking at myself blocking this defensive lineman. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I used to want to kill that guy. And now I have none of that left. I have no energy left. I have no rage left. And I'm thinking to myself, sitting here going through all this pain thinking it's glorious or something. Like I'm proving something to somebody. And this coach behind me, God bless him, but if I walk out of here tomorrow or right now, he'll just plug somebody else in there. So what am I doing here? So we finished out that season, and I knew I was done. Because that's the moment in football especially. If your heart's not in it, you're going to get yourself hurt, you're going to get somebody else hurt. And there's no reason to be there, because it's just too violent of a game to be out there half-heartedly. You can't do it. So we moved back to LA. My wife is from Pasadena. We had, at the time, our daughter this is 2014, our daughter's 3 years old. I decided, let's move back to LA. We'll set up shop, buy a house, start doing this thing called life after football. And it was a roller coaster, to say the least. It was at first a relief. I'm done. I did it. And I had no gripes, I went into the NFL. I went into my football career thinking I'm going to play 10 years. I played 6. The average is 2.3. I gave it everything I had, every moment I had it. I had nothing left to give. I wasn't, what am I going to do? Win a championship? I don't know. It's a team. It's the ultimate team game. And so I felt really good about being done. Like that was absolutely the right decision for me to make. But I had no real idea of what that process was going to be like, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, of coming to terms with myself, learning about who I was, healing trauma that had been swept under the rug for 20 years. And it started with writing. I wrote this article for SportsIllustrated.com called "What Does It Take to Stay in the NFL?" I talked about dealing with injuries and the day-to-day offensive lineman experience and the pill protocol. And I talk a little bit about cannabis and Adderall and the mental health issues, depression, anxiety, all the stuff that I had dealt with during my playing career. And it got a lot of attention. I had a lot of my former teammates calling me saying, "Eb, thank you for saying this. It's really powerful. This is my experience. It's what we're going through. Thank you for shining a light on it." I had old trainers calling me going, "What the f*** are you doing? How could you say that?" And I'm like, dude, A, I didn't use your name. B, I wasn't trying to throw anybody under the bus. I'm calling attention to a broken system.
Yeah, very broken. Very broken.
This is a broken system that needs to be addressed.
The first person to enlighten me to this, because you have your own assumptions, but Curtis Conway is a good friend, and he was sharing with me, because he was one of the guys trying to not take this stuff, but it's just like the pill protocols and the injections and all these things became so normalized, like he kind of lost himself.
Yeah.
And you shared in the book, and by the way, you are an excellent writer.
Thanks, man.
Excellent storyteller. And I want to come back to this and how that was even a part of your life as well. But you shared some of this in your experience, and it didn't just affect your body in trying to deal with the pain. A lot of stuff, by the way, doesn't even work in the first place.
Yeah.
But it didn't. So it had that aspect, but it also changed your personality, notice as well. Talk about that.
Absolutely. It was interesting. One of my gifts is I am a highly sensitive person. And it's taken me a while to recognize that as a gift. But what that meant during my football career in particular was I recognized so quickly that anytime I took these pills, whether it was the prescription anti-inflammatories like Cataflam, Indocin, Celebrex, these things, I just felt toxic. I felt my stomach was in knots. Like it felt like I had a knife. I'd just eaten acid or something. Not acid, the psychedelic, but literal acid. Like it was burning my gut. And then with the painkillers, I remember taking these things and just being thrown into complete chaos, mentally, emotionally, physically, where I would have this low hum of rage right below the surface, just so irritable. I couldn't barely be around anybody. And here I am coming out of surgeries, shoulder surgery, back surgery, at different stages of my career. And every time I would take these pills, and I'm in this super vulnerable state where I literally need help putting socks on and getting dressed. And I'm surrounded by people who love me, who are taking care of me. And I'm like lashing out at them. And I'm just like, can barely stand to be around them. And I remember seeing this, I'm going to speak in general, but there were very specific moments where I had taken the pill and I was being helped. And I remember lashing out at my mother. And I thought to myself, who is that? That's not me. What's going on here? And it was this pressure. And then not only that, but experiencing severe withdrawal symptoms after 2 or 3 days of prescribed dosages of Vicodin or Percocet or Oxycontin, waking up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning with knifing sensation in my gut, cold sweats, chills, aching all through my body. And it's that void It's that void. Your body is desperate for relief, the void that these pills create. And so I was gifted with this sensitivity, and through that experience, cannabis really became my preferred source of pain management, because it was the one thing I could come back to that helped me decompress the stress in my body and mind. I could connect with loved ones. I could get a good night's sleep and wake up the next day feeling recovered and rejuvenated. Whereas juxtaposing that to my experience with the pills, where it would just devastate me even further and throw me into further chaos.
The crazy part, though, is that the pills are normalized in our
exactly.
culture, and then the cannabis is villainized.
Yeah.
And, of course, I've talked about this a little bit, but the state of affairs with these opiates. It's the number one cause of death in the United States for people between the age of 18 and 45. It's not COVID. It's not heart disease. Both of those combined, you add those two numbers together, didn't equal, and we'll just use 2020 and 2021, for example, didn't equal the number of people who died from fentanyl, right? So synthetic opioid. Not to mention the more, original stuff. To add on top of that, the numbers get so skewed. But this isn't even talked about, and we'll put it up for folks that are watching the video to see, some of the statistics. But, and the crazy thing, of course, is it's not talked about because those platforms that would, or quote, supposed to be talking about it, our major news networks, they're funded by many of the pharmaceutical companies that put this shit out there on the streets in the first place. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so in the book, you actually said, you believe you were able to erase the use of opiates from your life due to your experience with cannabis. And, over the years, of course, I've been keeping my finger on the pulse a little bit because I'm always looking at the detrimental side and also the positive side. And just to share this with everybody, so this is published in the peer-reviewed journal Nature Medicine. The study was titled "A Chronic Low Dose of THC Restores Cognitive Function." And this was looking at, and this was a study on mice, and I'm going to mention a human study as well, that younger mice experienced a performance drop under the influence of THC, the psychoactive chemical that was then given to older mice and gave them a considerable performance boost, even putting them on par with younger mice who'd abstained. And so there's actually a notable amount of data on cannabis being therapeutic for traumatic brain injuries, for example. There's so much data on this. Yes. I was actually surprised. You encouraged me to check into it more just reading your book. And so this is one of the new ones that I reviewed today. And it was like, I couldn't believe, a part of my mind couldn't believe how much data this was. So this was published in the Journal of Clinical Investigation. The study was titled "Cannabinoids Promote Embryonic and Adult Hippocampus Neurogenesis and Produce Anti-Anxiety and Antidepressant-like Effects." Right? So we're talking about the memory center of the brain producing new brain cells.
Yeah.
Where we look at, there's some other data showing that it can reduce activity in the prefrontal cortex. But what I'm wanting to do, by the way, is just to highlight that we don't want to put a black and white on anything. That, even with opiates, they have their place. This is something that, opium's been utilized for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Of course, it's been turned into this cash crop and this commodity where everything from, a migraine to, somebody has toe surgery, they're giving these very strong drugs, right? When this was supposed to be, in our society, reserved for extreme circumstances. And so everything having its place and us being able to hold a space for, and the same thing with food.
Yeah.
To understand that everybody's unique. And also we want to make sure that we have things available for people who are suffering that are putting them in a place for you. It's like, this helped me to avoid dying from opiates by utilizing this substance. And so to appreciate your experience and your story, and also know there's some pretty solid science on it too.
Yeah. I love that you're bringing that up, because it's been interesting to me seeing some of the stuff come out and about cannabis in particular, that I've seen Dr. Amen talk about. You had him on the show, I think, and he was talking about this a little bit. And I saw this brain scan he did of someone who'd used cannabis, and it really shut the brain activity down, turned it down really low. And I was thinking about that in context to my experience with it. And what's really interesting is, in my life after football, and going on this journey of truth seeking and understanding the underlying reality of my experience and how things actually work, and looking at how do we get back to balance. So I think that's the most important thing, because we're in such a state of chaos.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it was interesting because one of my brothers, my football brothers, Ricky Williams, he pointed me to this thing of, I talk about the federal government's patent on cannabinoids as neuroprotectants and antioxidants, which blew my mind coming out of my football career, and legitimizing or validating my experience of this back alley drug healing me and helping me rejuvenate through a very traumatized state. But Ricky Williams said to me once, he said, in Ayurveda, in ancient Ayurveda, cannabis is viewed as a trauma reducer. And so when you take that into account of, say, even the younger mice versus the older mice, and THC having this inhibitory effect on a younger mind and a boosting effect on an older mind. And for me, when cannabis was super therapeutic for me during my football career, where I was enduring massive amounts of trauma, physical, mental, emotional, to now where I can't really use cannabis anymore. Because if I have a smudge too much THC, I'm blasted into panic and anxiety and darkness and places I don't need to spend any time these days, you know? And I believe that it's absolutely that. It's a trauma reducer. And once again, you know, in the modern era where cannabis is now being legalized after it's been stigmatized and demonized for so many years, and now it's becoming recreational, it's like, once again, we've missed the mark of, because in no way throughout my cannabis advocacy, talking about the importance of cannabis as medicine for football players or athletes enduring trauma, has it been part of my thought that we should just be smoking weed all day long, which plenty of people are doing, you know, thinking, oh, this is helping me. But part of the sensitivity and this allowing your inner guide to show you the way, it's always keeping your finger on the pulse of what is working for me, what is serving me. You can ask yourself that question. It's a really simple question. What is serving me in my highest good, so that when I wake up every day and whatever I do throughout my day, I am the most available, the most present, serving the highest good that I possibly can be in every moment. And so for me, it got to a point where, because I relied heavily on cannabis coming out of my football career, I was in a totally traumatized state. I was in a state of chaos. I had just left this thing that I'd been doing forever. And here I was, feeling as though I'd been dropped out in the middle of the ocean without a life preserver. And everybody's like, Eb, you're in life now. You know, I don't know where to go.
Good luck.
Yeah. Enjoy. And I relied heavily on cannabis, and it just slowly but surely it revealed itself. I'd smoke a little bit and then be like, oh no, this isn't what I want. This isn't working for me anymore. To now, I just use CBD, honestly.
And that the science on CBD is just obviously exploded as well.
Yeah.
And, you know, especially in particular in the treatment of pain, you've got so many great stories as well in the book about, you know, people dealing with extreme conditions and finding relief through this means. But you said something that ties back to the very first thing I asked you about, keeping your finger on the pulse of like what's working for you.
Yeah.
In order to be able to do that intelligently and ethically, you have to be able to listen to your body.
Yeah.
And that's the big issue. And I think that part of that opening, one of the most wonderful tools to access that is through a practice of meditation.
Absolutely.
So what Let's talk about that a
Yeah.
little bit. What can we do to tune in more to our inner guidance system at a time when people are doing anything but?
Yeah. It's the best question. So I want to say one thing that's really interesting, and I'm going to tie it. All of that I said about my football career, that was getting me to how I came to meditation. I do a lot of coaching, one-on-one, and these corporate wellness programming. And I work with a lot of people. People just like, that's my passion, is to connect with people, whether it's teaching yoga or meditation or life coaching, greatness coaching, whatever it is. And something that's really interesting about what you just said, and one of my mentors said this to me because I have asked the question, because for me to get to meditation, I had to hit complete rock bottom. For years, my brother had been saying to me, Eb, you should try meditation. And be like, that. I don't have time for that, dude. No way, you know? And finally, around 2016, my entire life was crashing over me in a tidal wave. My shame, my guilt, my childhood trauma, all the mistakes I had made throughout my football career, in my relationships, was just overwhelming me. And I was flattened by the universe. And it culminated, I talk about it in the book, with this phone call. I watched myself screaming into the phone at my wife, I'm going to kill myself or I'm going to kill somebody, as I'm driving to go to this job. And a couple hours later, I got a call from my mom. She invited me to dinner. You know, in tears, I'm just like, yeah, I'll come. And that led me into 12-step programs, Al-Anon, which was super beneficial for me, especially this men's group that I found that my brother brought me into. And that started to loosen the grip of all the darkness and the shame and the guilt and all the stuff that I had been dealing with and trying to hold on to myself. That led me into therapy. And the 12-step program also, it opened the door for me to see prayer and meditation as tools for my salvation. And so finally, I'm sitting there after my first meeting in Al-Anon. I find myself a therapist. I go to this therapist's office. I'm sitting there. We have a good session. At the end of the session, she says, Eb, have you ever tried meditation? And I'm just like, here we are, back at the answer, you know, that I've been resisting for so long. And I just was I had nowhere else to go. I thought, okay, yeah, I'll try it. And she turned me on to this app that actually doesn't exist anymore. And I just started listening to this app, this guided meditations. And I go for long walks and I just put this app on. And I just started feeling more and more relief. And it started to develop this craving for meditation, for going inside, for feeling this infinite stillness that's just deep inside the heart that I hadn't really I had felt. We all feel glimpses of it when we're out in nature or with our best friends, our family, our loved ones. We've all had that like glimpse of God, of infinity, of love. And I started to tap into it, and I was just like, this is what it is. This is what I've needed. And so, you know, I say that about hitting rock bottom because we can either grow through insight or pain. And right now, it feels like we're in a paradigm where insight isn't really a possibility. Because I work with people who are clearly a problem for their entire work environment. Like everyone I talk to, it's always about this person, you know?
Yeah.
And then I go and talk to the person and they just have no understanding. They have no awareness. They have no willingness. They don't even know that something's wrong. And in that case, what do we do? Well, I can point you in the direction of where to go, of where to start. Like, hey, you need to start a daily meditation practice, maybe 5 minutes, just to loosen the grip so that you can get some space so that you can start to see. Maybe it is that you just need to get some exercise 3 or 4 days a week. Make sure to get that in, because you can't just be going nonstop every day. But right now, where we are, it takes that suffering, like you talked about it in Eat Smarter. Your suffering, your pain was your gift. Your challenges to overcome that, that's same with me. You know? And when we are able to, and it's so hard, it's the hardest thing. That's why not many people are able to do it, or it takes a long time. I know people in their 50s, 60s who are still trapped because they're unwilling to just look at the reality of their life. And that's where the magic comes, man. When we get real with what is. What is? Can I take accountability for my life? Because every time you point the finger, there's 3 pointing right back at you. Mm-hmm. You know?
Yeah.
It's real.
That's facts. Yeah. You said something so powerful. If you just get this one thing, like, life becomes magical.
Yeah.
And you just said that you can learn through either insight or through pain. And you and I both know pain is a wonderful teacher.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound good.
No.
You know, it's just like, pain, is that you? You know, it's just like, stay the away from me. But in reality, pain is a wonderful teacher. And oftentimes we face that pain when we're not learning through insight, when we're not paying attention to our inner and outer guidance system. You know, that outer guidance system is, you can also live through the lives of others in a strange way, you know, because we are connected. And so there's so much great feedback and lessons to be learned from those who've taken the steps before us. But now we're just like, we don't give a shit about that either. You know, it's just like, give me the pain. And so, but here's the thing. As you mentioned, people can get trapped in that cycle of pain and not learn the lesson, right? And I've heard you say this before, which is a universal truth, that the universe will test you.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes that pain is showing up as a bridge, in a sense, to get you to where you believe you want to be or where you should be, right? It's just like, I want this. Well, here's your qualifiers, right? And sometimes we get so trapped in the qualifiers, we don't understand, like, oh, wow, there's a gift in this, you know? And so when that pain set in my life, that same rock bottom, it was a great place for me to stand on, because I got to see, wow, like, there's actually, I want to be this person, right? I saw myself as being the first, quote, the first in my family to fill in the blank, you know, to be successful, to make it out of poverty, whatever the case might be. And for me to be that person, I had to become something else, you know, or more of myself in a sense.
Yeah,
but
that's an interesting paradox too.
Yeah. I had these qualities, and we all do. This is the great thing, and I want to express this too. We all have the full smorgasbord of capacities and qualities in us already.
Yeah.
Compassion, insight, intelligence, you name it. You've got it in you. Also, anger, you know, resentment, all of that stuff is there. But it's understanding that we get to activate those things. And oftentimes that pain is there as like activator gel. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I just thought of Soul Glow, by the way. Shout out to Coming to America. All right.
I love that. Absolutely. It's interesting you say that, because a guy that I work with, he was saying to me a couple weeks ago, he said, Eb, I want to be like you. It's like, I see you come in here. You're the medicine man, dude. You're the healer. You take us through breath work and yoga, and You just have all this insight and knowledge and love. And, and he's like, how do I do that? How do I do that? And I said to him, well, one day at a time, man. And you can't be like me. You have to be you. If you told me 7, 8 years ago when I was in the NFL that this is where I'd be right here, right now, I wouldn't even have known what you were talking about. And I said, you know, this thing just happens one step at a time. We don't just become, I didn't just become this guy. If I tried to make this happen, I never would have done it. I would have messed it up. It wouldn't have happened. And so fast forward a week, and this kid's doing so much good work. He's really working his ass off. Like, he's doing such good work. And he calls me up and he's just like, Eb, I can barely breathe. These things that I thought I healed long ago, man, they're just like, feel like the universe is just breaking me. And I said, remember when you told me, Eb, I want to be like you? I said, you don't see the other 16 hours of the day where I'm in that. I'm in the darkness, dancing with my demons, making friends with my pain. And I'm just in a chokehold with depression and anxiety and this sense of not being enough, and constantly just, I don't want to use the word wrestling. It's more dancing, you know, because at the end of the day, it's about coming to terms with ourselves. And I said this thing occurred to me the other day. Time goes in a circle, if time is even real. Whatever it is, life, it moves in a circle. And it moves in a circle until we start to, and as we start to grow and evolve and heal and transcend old selves and old behaviors and old paradigms, then it starts to move in a spiral. Because we're constantly being confronted by the same things over and over again. But the difference is, where are we at? Where are we at on the journey, so that now that thing that I was in the midst of, that was right here, it was so real and so heavy, now my head is a little bit above it. And I can see, oh, wow, look at that. That same thing that keeps coming up throughout my life. Maybe it's every year, maybe it's every few years, maybe it's every few months. This same paradigm experience comes up that's a trigger for me, but now my head's a little bit above it and I can see it. And now I have an option, because I don't have to be a slave to it. I don't have to react to it. I don't have to be in that, but I can make a different decision. And then one day you keep doing the work, and all of a sudden that thing is so far down. It's like a pinprick in the sky. It's like looking up at the night sky and it's just a star. It's so far away, it's just barely a memory. That thing that you were once so trapped by is now like looking down at a star. It's so far away. It's just a pinprick of light in the night sky. Just a pinprick. It's barely there anymore. It's a whisper when it was once a scream. And I was thinking, in today's day and age, with social media culture and this branding of enlightenment that's so bizarre, because spirituality is so beyond putting it in a box or any kind of container. Because everyone wants to say, this is the way. This is the answer. I've got it. You know? And the truth of the matter is, you are the way.
Mm-hmm. Come on. Yeah. Yeah.
You are the way. And we have this misconception, especially in the plant medicine community and this new age spirituality, which is great. I think it means well. But there are people doing ayahuasca every weekend who can't find their car keys. You know?
Yes.
You know, it's like, what good does it do if we're not becoming more whole, better people in our daily lives, in the mundane? Because that's what it's about, dude. Your interactions with everyone you meet at the grocery store, at the gas station. Everyone can be the starry-eyed Buddha at the ayahuasca ceremony or the wellness event. Can you be that clear, present being when you're pumping your gas or getting your coffee? When you're sitting with your family? That's when it matters. That's when the rubber meets the road. And there's this misconception of, oh, I healed that thing. It's like, no, we don't heal things. We don't ever heal it and it just goes away. It never goes anywhere. It's still there because that's part of you. That's your life. That's who you are. That puts you here. That thing, that trauma, that pain, that's part of how you're here, man. It's about coming to terms with it and loving it. Loving it. Can we love every aspect of ourselves? That's it, man. That's the task. Because then that's how you get to the point where you're looking, it's like it's so far away and you come up against it again and you go, man, remember when that was so triggering that I could barely function? Now I can just breathe and watch it. And it's like, oh my God, look how far we've come. Look how far I've come.
The language we use would be, you know, we've grown ourselves. That's just one way of articulating it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if we don't do that, that lesson, that thing that shows up is going to inflict that same amount of pain or more.
Yeah.
But as you grow yourself, when these things present themselves, you know, asking, what is this trying to teach me? What gift is this bringing into my life? What quality is needing to emerge from me right now? Whatever it takes, and doing the work, like you said, you start to distance yourself or to grow from it. But I love that you said this. I've heard, again, nobody's ever said this, you know, articulated like this, but you're able to see above it in a sense. And so no longer are you in the thing, right? Which even as I'm saying this, like talking to you is just like, you still are in it because it's a part of you, but you're able to kind of rise above it and to see all the other pieces. You're no longer, because, you know, the first time, my mother-in-law is the person who taught me meditation. And the first time I, you know, implored, like I closed my eyes, I followed the steps, and she said, boom, I woke up, you know, for the first time. And when I say that, it doesn't mean that, oh, now I'm enlightened and I'm walking around and like, you know, floating on a cloud. It's more like I realized that I hadn't had a conscious thought my entire life. I was just in it. I was just happening.
Yeah.
And I was never aware that there was this thinking happening. I was so attached to the thoughts.
Yeah.
And so now suddenly there was this like separation in a sense and this opening. And it sounds kind of cool, but it took years of learning how to live again in a sense, you know? And that's where that work was as well. It just, because I think I had such a big mission on my heart that I had to go through these qualifiers. And so like your guy who was asking you, like, you know, I want to be just like you. Well, first of all, do you want to be a straight up murderer in the NFL first? You know what I mean? Like, you got to be a killer first, you know, and then but your story is different.
Yeah.
And everybody's story has value and is magnificent, but it's just tapping into that. But the beautiful part is he can take lessons from you throughout your journey. That's where the insight comes in at, you know, it's very powerful. And the last thing too, you mentioned, I love this term, is dancing with it, because there's another huge misconception. We've been talking about misconceptions today, that, you know, once you work on yourself or you reach a state of enlightenment or whatever it is, then, you know, you're just in this eternal peace. And I know for a fact, like I know some of the guys, right? And they still have real world problems. Of course, they do address them differently. It doesn't destroy them, but they still deal with life stuff, you know, whatever guru you're listening to. And I'm talking about the robes and everything, right? They're still dealing with life stuff, The only certainty in life is that you're going to continue to face challenges. It's just what is.
Yeah.
And so dancing with it is a great term because it's just going to happen. I love that you pivoted from saying wrestle with it, because we can get in down and dirty with it, but also dancing with it. But sometimes, it's a dirty dance. It's a Patrick Swayze. Sometimes it's a tango. Sometimes it's a Nina Pop. Like there's different dances that you do with the problems.
Yeah.
But that's just a part. So I think one of the big takeaways from today is learning how to dance.
That's it, man. That's it. And it's all your perception, like that shift from the wrestling with it. Because if you're wrestling, that denotes some sort of struggle. And it can be a struggle. This life is fucking hard. It's not easy. Like you said, this is a constant challenge. If you're doing it right. Now we know in this day and age, a lot of people are addicted to comfort. And they want to just play it safe. But we don't get anywhere when we play it safe. We don't change.
You got to talk about this, because I heard you say that, ironically, our society has developed so many comforts that on the other side, we've actually become far more sensitive and far more divisive, ironically, right?
Yeah.
So let me actually look at the exact words, because I wrote this down too. You said that as we've gotten more comforts as a species, we've gotten more sensitive and extreme in our views.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
It's an interesting paradox, isn't it? Because the more comfortable we become, the more sensitive, and I don't know if I like that word, and I know what you're talking about because I asked Tony Robbins about that. That was where that was from, on Hot Boxing. Because sensitivity is a superpower. If you're sensitive, you're highly in tune with what's going on. And that's a good thing. But the sensitivity, in the context I was using it there, was this disdain for discomfort. It becomes, you're so comfortable that you can't possibly imagine anything contrary to that experience. And so we've seen that we can't have a hard conversation. If you're sitting across from somebody who has a different view than you, God forbid we're going to try to eat dinner together. I mean, I posted this thing the other day about soy, because I think, as you know, and you articulate so beautifully, and I love how you talk about food as this entity in our universe. I love that. Because food is so magical. On that note, I wanted to say to you, I had this thought weirdly occur to me the other day. If we had a magical camera that could follow the food from when it goes into our mouth, down our throat, into our stomach, it would be so interesting, because our body it's like a magic trick that our body takes this food, digests it, and it vanishes, and it comes into our cells in our body, and it creates this thing. It's a trip. But so I posted this thing about soy and just how destructive it is, in my opinion, to just throwing our bodies into hormonal chaos. And I imagine that organic soy, which is probably very rare, I know it's been eaten in Asia for a long time, it's probably okay, but the soy that as we know it today,
and the amounts that we're consuming,
with the soybean oil, it's dangerous. And I think it's affecting our society in ways that are far beyond what we could have ever imagined. That's happening right in front of our eyes. That's another podcast. But I posted this thing about soy, and someone commented, they said, "Man, I really loved everything you were saying until you posted this about soy." And I was just like, man, how sad is that? How sad is that you liked everything I was saying until I said this thing about soy. And that's it right there, isn't it?
Yep.
That's this problem. And it's created all of these insane issues. And it was interesting. I've talked about this a lot. And it's because it's something that if you're watching culture is just, it's completely obvious of we are so comfortable that we are creating problems. We're creating problems for ourselves in our extremism, because you can't say anything that is critical. You can't say anything that is honest. You can't say anything that perhaps challenges some cultural ideology. I mean, talk about masks and vaccines and all of that. And it's just insane that because we're so comfortable and we want it to be just, let's just get on with it, and it creates this extremism of it's not allowed to be anything but this. And I don't know if it's intentional. I know a lot of people would probably say it is. I like to look at it as humans are fallible creatures. And everyone, I believe, to some extent, is doing the best they can. Even the fucking villains, man. That's the trip. So if we can function on that understanding, then I don't understand. There's this weird thing of utilitarianism, of trying to make everyone think the same and be the same. And you look out into nature, nothing is the same. Nothing is the same.
We got sea turtles and then birds. You know what I mean?
Totally. And lions, and salamanders and ladybugs and flowers, thousands of
mushrooms. Where the hell they come from?
Exactly. Exactly. Nothing is the same. Why do we want everyone to be the same? The magic, the magnificence, the majesty of it all is in the diversity. Right?
You know why? It's fear.
Yeah.
Fear of what's different.
Yeah.
Fear of uncertainty. Fear of being wrong. That's one of the biggest things right now because, folks, in order to look at something that is, for example, if we take on a belief that a particular protocol is safe and effective, and then we find out that that thing is other than safe and effective, and you've been a pioneering voice and a voice of influence and a voice of persistence and manipulation for that thing, and you find out that it's contrary to what you believed, man, it takes an incredible amount of work and humanity to be able to say I was wrong and to apologize.
Yeah.
We have heard very few apologies. No, we haven't heard any apologies throughout this entire show that is the last couple of years, and of course, many of the things that have unfolded, I mentioned at the very beginning because I'm a scientist and I can see it coming, but at no point, instead of saying, what, we messed up here, these things, we created a false sense of security by covering your face, which seems logical, right? I'm going to cover my face. It's going to stop the spread. Didn't work. Just look at but instead of acknowledging, because, I
don't know if it's logical.
So I had very, very clear peer-reviewed data in some of the most prestigious medical journals. We'll put some up for everybody to see. But one of them was in the BMJ. One of them was in the International Journal of Nursing Studies. And essentially, again and again and again, the biggest culprit was cloth mask being wildly ineffective to some degree. In one of the studies, the scientists, and we'll put this highlighted portion, said that in the particular study that the surgical masks were found to be ineffective and cloth mask less effective than ineffective. What does that mean? less effective than ineffective, right? So this means that there's something potentially nefarious going on with them. And then sure enough, today, even on CNN, we've got, their health, quote, health expert who's been on different boards and things like that, positions of power in government, saying, cloth masks are nothing more than a facial ornament, right? I said this in the beginning because that's what the data show. But instead of acknowledging that, they just say, just wear 2. 2 or 3, of course, is clearly going to work better.
Yeah, definitely.
And so in order for them to acknowledge, and I even did put this in the Mass Facts documentary, I mentioned, I detailed, I took a moment just to say, listen, people that are advocating this, it's going to be incredibly difficult for them to acknowledge that they were wrong. All right. That was published. We released that in June, July of 2020. And it took off like a rocket. The biggest thing I've ever done, but of course censored as well. And I just went through peer-reviewed data and pointed people to the years and years of documented scientific proof that we have on things that actually work to make humans more resilient, to improve our immune systems, yada, yada. Heaven forbid, right? And these things, again, it's supposed to be a conversation piece.
Yeah.
And for us to be able to talk about these things. But when we have people in positions of power that can suppress your voice just like that, just turn your voice off, because, and I want to ask you about this, because a lot of folks will be like, well, that's their right. It's the platform. They can do whatever they want with that platform. What do you think about that?
I think that's a really dark view. Yeah, there's been a lot of really disturbing things. And we were talking about it a little bit at the beginning before we started about fear being weaponized, and essentially most government institutions, law enforcement, policymakers really not doing anything, enforcing any of these mandates or laws, but allowing the fear seeds to proliferate to such an extent that the civilians, the citizens of this country, have been policing each other.
Yeah.
And there's the big conversation right now because Elon Musk just bought the lion's share of Twitter. And he's, as far as I can tell, I mean, I've seen some guys who are like, oh, something's weird is going on. I think that's also some dysfunctional programming to think that, to never being able to see the light in the bigger, big corporate scenarios that are taking place. But Elon has said, I think censorship is a massive mistake, and free speech is what this country was built on, essentially.
First Amendment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not the third.
Yeah.
First. Why would they do that?
Well, it goes back to this thing, man. Taking accountability for your life. So many people don't want that. They don't want to take accountability, because then that means they're responsible for their own well-being.
Responsible for their own thinking.
Even before, yes, of course. And so, thoughts are material. Thoughts are energy. It's the first step. Thoughts, words, actions. That materializes, manifests into your life. That's what your life looks like. How you think is what your life is. You don't see the world as it is. You see the world as you are, as you perceive yourself to be and the world to be. And so a lot of people want to blame everybody. They want to have someone else has the answer. Shawn's got it. Biden's got it. He's the answer. Build back better, baby. That'll be it, It's Trump's fault. It's this guy's fault. Fauci has the answer. He's an expert. He only sabotaged the AIDS pandemic treatments. He surely wouldn't do that for COVID, you know? So we want to put the onus on somebody else to keep us safe, from the microcosm to the macrocosm. And that is what, to me, fuels all of that. People going, because I posted something, I forget what it was. I was talking about censorship itself and talking about how we need people, the contrarians, to the mainstream narrative. And someone commented like, yeah, well, if they're saying something that isn't true, they shouldn't be allowed to say it. And I'm like, who decides what's true? The money? Because that's where we're at, honestly. Unfortunately, all the news you're watching, you're just absorbing into your consciousness from CNN and NBC and all the mainstream media players.
And how often have these so-called health officials said things that were untrue?
Absolutely. Throughout. We can look at it all. We can look at it. We have evidence because of film and recordings.
Right, it's literally record. This isn't like 1,000 years ago where there was a guy writing on a scroll.
It's like, not hearsay.
The scroll said, we got video.
Yeah.
Like, you said this thing and it was so wrong. You're the head of the CDC.
From a legal standpoint, it's not hearsay. It's not somebody said, oh, he said that. It's a recording of them saying X, Y, or Z. And so I think one of the beauties, I believe, of the internet is that it has careened us into this paradigm of nothing can be hidden. And Pandora's box has been opened. And so it's a very slippery slope. I mean, how many more dystopian tales do we have to have? 1984, the detriment of censorship and what that causes. We can't slip into a place of, oh, people can't be exposed to anything that's not true. Because then the only things that are deemed true are by the people in power, the governing bodies, which are really the people who have the money. Big Pharma has pumped how many billions of dollars into advertising for media?
Not to mention into the FDA.
The FDA? The CDC?
Yeah.
The WHO?
It's crazy.
So that information is corrupted. As far as I can tell, you think it's not corrupted? That's what blows my mind. And it's and here's the answer, man. Here's the solution, because I get really, it's hard for me to look at social media anymore. Honestly, I've hired a guy who just handles it all for me. And I don't want to look at it because every time I look at it, it gets really dark. But I want to stay in the solutions. I made that decision because COVID was like a war for me on the inside. And I realized that I can't really spend my time arguing with people about what's real or what's true, because that is totally subjective in the eyes of the beholder, based on their belief system, their conditioning, their life practices, all of that. So what can I do? How can I be part of the solution? I can talk about meditation. I could talk about breath work. I could talk about going within through various practices and principles so that you can reveal your inner truth, because that's the only truth that matters, the inner truth. And only when you have that established can you then start to decipher what's real and what's not real on this outside.
That's powerful. That is so powerful, man. And thank you for doing that. because what you're saying, I mean, this is a foundational truth about being able to operate in our world, because what it is that it's kind of like it's framed as that this is for your protection. When we're saying this is misinformation, what's true or not, is that you are incapable of understanding what's true. You are even though you might be an adult, you are a child to us, and we will spoon feed you what we deem to be the truth, because you're not able to decipher that. Basically, you're stupid, okay? You're a dummy. And so we're going to tell you what's true because you don't have that capacity, right? Yeah. And so when somebody's posting, the alien just landed in my backyard and we're making barbecue or whatever, and you're just so stupid that you're like, oh my God, this guy's got aliens in his backyard, and they're like, you know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
So here's the truth. The solution has never been, and this is why it's the First Amendment, freedom of speech. It's not to take what could be considered bad information, even though it might be true. It was never to have bad information suppressed and censored, and you can't say that. The solution for bad information is better information. That's it. The solution for what we deem to be misinformation is just cultivating better information and allowing people, giving people the tools to be able to decipher between the two. Because once we get into this place of this is right and this is wrong, there are very few things in our reality that have a right and wrong. They're just very distinct. Most things, there's a huge spectrum of gray, right? And so within that gray is where science lives, actually, because once we have a scientific tenet that is infallible and unquestionable, it's no longer science. That's dogma that doesn't even exist in a scientific paradigm, because science is questions. It's a language, but and science is also just one thread of something much bigger. It's us trying to use our language and what we know, which we talked about this before the show, but we were just talking a little bit about how little we know as a species. Like we know next to nothing. We're just all utilizing tools to give us some sense of certainty so that we get up in the morning.
Right.
You know what I mean? To try to make sense of this very strange phenomenon. We're spinning around on this third rock from the sun, you know what I mean? In the middle of this galaxy. And if you even want to even just entertain the fact that there are billions of galaxies in the, quote, observable universe, all right? There's shit that's not even observable, by the way, well, a lot more. Billions of galaxies, right? And within that, billions of galaxies, how many planets are there, right? And so we get into that conversation and you think your problems are so big, you think this is misinformation?
Yeah.
You can't even, handle that on your Instagram feed?
Yeah.
We're f***ing up.
Yeah.
And we have the capacity. This is the beauty is, again, and I want to thank you for this. And I see you, and you're doing it at such a level of grace. I said that the grace was lacking earlier in communication. You're doing it with such a grace because of who you are and where you come from. Your trial as a warrior and being able to imbue that with such spirit and compassion, it shows the spectrum of potential. And I love the quote that, especially right now, and I went with my youngest son, Britton. There's this trail by our house, and and it's kind of tough, but I was just like, sometimes it'll be the four of us, both of my sons and my wife, and we kind of go at a family pace. I was like, we're about to dart through this bad boy, all right? And so we did, and of course, like, it was challenging, and I'm like, I challenge you because I want you to be strong in a world that you're going to be faced with challenges. I said this to him. I love this statement that it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Yeah.
And so it's creating that capacity to be ready for whatever might happen, rather than you finding yourself in the middle of a war and you don't have the skills and the mindset and the capacity to be able to handle the situation. You are that warrior in a garden. And that's one of the things that I see in you. And so I just want to thank you for that, because it's really amazing to see.
Thanks, brother. Bursting into tears here, man. Love that. It's powerful, dude. Teaching that to your son, super powerful. I'm going through some things right now, and you talked about it in your book. The universe gave you a test that you weren't prepared for. And I'm thinking about like all the great men I've been around in my life. I've been so blessed to be around great men. And I'm going through some now. It's just so real. You know, my wife and I are getting a divorce, and it's the most painful, challenging thing I've ever been through in my life. But somehow, all the work I've done throughout my life, the willing to jump into the fire over and over again, the willingness to do the hard things always and pushing myself, I've never been more prepared. And my wife and I are in this position where we're going through this thing that for me, when my parents got divorced when I was 7, it was chaos and death. It was hell. And now, going through it myself, we're going through it with so much love and compassion and gratitude. And I don't have to transfer that trauma to my daughter, and she can see what's possible, what love is. You know, life is a miracle, man. But we have to be willing to live it. Because it's not going to happen. It doesn't just happen. It happens all around you, and it's up to you whether you're going to live it or not. And will you be prepared when the real tests come? Because all you've got is this. All you've got is this. Your heart and your intuition and your guide. And sometimes that says things that are far beyond your rationale, your logical mind, your ego identity. What you think is supposed to happen means nothing. We make plans and God laughs. And are you willing when the time comes? Will you be willing? Will you have the strength? Will you have the courage to do what's necessary to live your life to the highest, greatest extent? And you're passing that along to your son, man. And I hope to do that for my daughter.
Yeah, you are. You are.
Thanks, man.
I've got to ask you about this because we had a conversation when you were working on your book. And this is when I was just like, man, I really like this guy, you know? But you saw yourself as NFL, and I'm going to write. Like, writing is going to be a part of my future. And you even went to the extent of the university that you chose, them having a creative writing program, right? Might, you know, one of the top in the country, if not tops in the country. And so you really took that seriously to invest in that. And I want to ask you about this because it's a really, so we'll get to the outpicturing of it, but what is it about writing? What inspired you to want to write? Why did you see yourself, even to the extent of like choosing that at the university? What is it about writing for you?
I love the craft of taking thoughts and alchemizing it onto paper and telling stories. And my dad's a painter. He's an artist. And I grew up surrounded by artists and athletes. It was such a blessing, this dichotomy of art and sports. But writing, for whatever reason, was always just the medium I loved, because I felt like I could paint a picture with words. And I loved doing that. And when I was in, I think it was my sophomore or junior year of high school, I found out that you could major in creative writing. And so when I started getting scholarship offers, I would ask all the schools, do you have creative writing as a major? And Arizona was pretty much the only school, because I had offers to Cal. Cal has probably the #1 English program in the country. Oklahoma has a really good English program. Iowa is the only other school that has a great creative writing program. I didn't get an offer from Iowa. Arizona, the moment I sat in the chair at this, it was like a student or like a future student seminar or something where they brought in it was a junior day. And I came in, met all the coaches and everybody in the program and the trainers and some of the academic people. And this woman came in, and one of the things she said, we have the best creative writing program in the country. And I was just like, boom, this is where I'm at. This is it.
People seeing you on the football field would have never thought that. Just seeing you, like, this guy, it was creative writing that was the deal breaker for him as far as like where he's going to go.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible, man. And then to see that you put that into creating your book. And again, it was a joy to read. I'm 3/4 of the way through. And I just like in one sitting, I read half of the book.
Yeah.
And I just got swept up in. I got swept up into the stories. And I was really surprised by that because I thought it would be a little bit more technical. Because you're providing all these great insights along the way. But just the flow of it. And it's even called Ebb and Flow, of course.
Yeah.
And your ability to paint pictures with words, like it was really prominent.
I love that.
And so, man, can you let people know where to pick up a copy?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's available on Amazon. The Ebb and Flow, Basic Tools to Transform Your Life. That's pretty much it. It's on Amazon.
Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here to optimize your mindset and to achieve your goals faster.
People say to me, well, why do you do your meditations in the morning? I always say, easy. Because if I can overcome myself at the beginning of the day, the rest of the day is easy. That's the biggest mastery, right? Is the self.